All right, if I could have everyone's attention, it is 10 minutes after 6 o'clock, and I will officially call to order this special meeting of the Waco ISD Board of Trustees. We do have a quorum of members present, and at this time we'll move on to item 3A, which is our community meeting. First, on behalf of the Waco ISD Board of Trustees, we want to welcome you to this, our second of 3 community meetings on the issues of possible school closures or replacement of the Board of Trustees in accordance with House Bill 1842 and Senate Bill 1882. When accountability ratings are released next August, as many as 5 of our campuses could be impacted by this legislative mandate. Tonight's meeting is actually posted as a formal meeting of the Board of Trustees so that we could have a quorum present. But our real purpose tonight is to listen to you and to get your feedback and your thoughts on how this community can continue to move forward to keep the schools open in Waco ISD, particularly these 5 campuses that are potentially impacted by this legislation. Since this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees, I do want to introduce my colleagues on the board who are here tonight. Stephanie Korteweg is not here this evening. I think she has gone to a conference, but we do have Vice President Alan Sykes, our Secretary Norman Manning, board members Carrie Dupuy, Larry Perez, and Angela Tikel. And I'm the board president, Pat Atkins. I do have a couple of announcements. First of all, there are handouts, including a PowerPoint presentation and a 1-page summary of opportunities for you to get involved. If you don't have a copy of those, raise your hand and we'll make sure that Laura gets one to you so you can follow tonight's presentation. Secondly, on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the district, we want to take this opportunity to thank the Waco Foundation, who's helped provide tonight the CEO of the Texas Tribune, Mr. Evan Smith, to help facilitate and coordinate the presentation this evening. It is our expectation, and I think that's been borne out by the fact that we have very few empty seats, that this was going to be our best attended and largest community meeting. And so it is the district's sincere hope that Evan's presence here tonight will help us have a thoughtful discussion and deliberation on these legislative mandates, both through his asking some questions of the superintendent and also ensuring that all of your questions are answered during the process of the Q&A this evening. This is the part that makes me nervous. The superintendent has asked me to recognize some of the honored guests who are here this evening. And as I begin this process, I know I'm going to leave people out. But I will begin with, on the front row, we do have joining us this evening our legislator, Representative Doc Anderson. Doc, thank you. We also have the interim dean of the Baylor School of Education, Dr. Terrell Saxon. I forget where Terrell went. There he is. Seated next to Dr. Saxon, we have the first gentleman of Baylor University joining us this evening. Anybody else we want me to recognize? We've got funders here. We have representatives of all 3 community foundations, the United Way, and other guests. And if I start naming folks, I'm going to leave someone out and they're going to get their feelings hurt, so I'm going to stop right there. On behalf of the board, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your continued interest and support of the Waco Public Schools. There are some serious and difficult decisions that are going to be made in the coming months, but also some real opportunities to really get some commitment of resources to these campuses and really unite as a community as we ensure that we're able to keep these schools open. And so your interest here tonight really means a lot to all of us, and we want to, again, thank you both for listening attentively to the overview from Dr. Nelson, but then really giving us your thoughts and your insights on where we move forward from here. With that, Please join me in welcoming the Superintendent of the Waco Public Schools, Dr. A. Marcus Nelson.
Buenas noches. Good evening. Very excited to be here and spend time continuing our conversation with our community about the realities of our school system. Make no mistakes about it, we're very proud of the Waco Independent School District. I know I consider it an honor and a privilege to serve as the superintendent of schools that's really part of such a strong and vibrant community. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump into our presentation that really intends to start off with highlighting some of the successes. But before I get started, I did want to thank all of you for joining us here tonight. We understand that this community cares about the public schools. I really believe that. And I believe that we have to do a better job. We're going to have to perform at higher levels in order to make sure the adults are going to have to perform at higher levels in order to make sure that our kids get what they deserve. I'd like to start by giving a quick rundown of a recent survey we did. Between September 6th and September 20th, more than 3,500 people in our community participated in a survey we conducted. We were asking all kinds of questions to find out how people view WISD. And I mean, we asked kids, we asked parents, we asked staff, we asked members of the community. And in general, I would say that people are pretty happy with the school system. People feel like our schools are safe. They feel like overall we do a good job. And I won't go over all the specifics of the survey, but one slide we wanted to show is that 69% of our community said that the overall quality of our school system is either excellent or good. We have some other points in our survey we wanted to highlight. I won't read them all to you, but people feel like we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars. They agree that our environment is safe, that we have strong conversations with our kids about success beyond high school and what that looks like. And we take pride in that as a school system. The survey did highlight a few opportunities to improve. In general, parents and students have a more positive perception of Waco ISD than our community members. Also, 1/3 of our adults and almost half of our students were undecided about whether or not we were good financial stewards. I've talked to a bunch of kids about that, and a lot of them said, Dr. Nelson, define stewardship. So I told them to go ask their pastor. Anyways. Just a quick overview of our district. Right under 15,000 students, 2,800 employees. In my humble opinion, we're the lifeblood of this city. Everything good and positive about what we want for the future has to go through the success or lack thereof of our public schools. So I sat today with the chief of police, and he was talking about what he's going to do to stop crime in 2020. You know what the answer to that is? Fix your public schools. More of your kids will be going to college instead of just running the streets looking for criminal activity. The list goes on and on of our district. A couple of highlights I did want to talk about. We have our GWAMA, our Greater Waco Advanced Manufacturing Academy. See, we're trying to take real seriously creating pipelines for kids. And we really want any kid that says, I want to go to Baylor University, well, we want to work with Dr. Livingstone and her team and make that happen. Anyone that says they want to go to MCC, we want to work with Dr. McCowan. Everybody help me welcome the president of MCC, Dr. Johnette McCowan, who's here. Dr. McCowan and I meet regularly, and We've had added dual credit courses, our Accelerate program. Dr. McCown wouldn't want me to say it, but it's true. One of her major suppliers of students is the Waco Independent School District. And you can go into any class at MCC and you can find non-traditional students. Some of them are 40, 45 years old, deciding to go get their college degree, and sitting right next to them in that college algebra class is a 16-year-old who wants to go to Baylor and be a doctor or a lawyer. So we're proud of those pathways. Tennyson Middle School, without question, one of the best middle schools in Central Texas. 7 academic distinctions. That's the most you can get. And so we're proud that we do have an example of what excellence can look like with Tennyson. Our finances continue to be clearly outstanding under the direction of our Chief Financial Officer, who's here today. I know she doesn't want me to recognize her because she doesn't like that kind of attention, but I would say that we're very proud of our first financial rating, which is basically we get one of the highest scores you can get, and we've gotten it every year under our current financial leadership. You may have saw in the paper yesterday, we're real proud to be good financial stewards. One of the things we've tried to do is streamline our organization, and it has resulted in a reorganization that has eliminated over 8 positions, and we're trying to get lean and mean. So there's not just people sitting around and no one can tell you what they do. Everybody on our team is working their fingers to the bone. And all of our vision and our mission is clearly tied to improving student achievement. Now, I could go on and on about all the things I love about this city. What a wonderful community, a diverse city. In my opinion, the diversity of this city is our strength. The very fact that you have an East Waco, a South Waco, and you have these communities that cherish certain cultures, and they're forced to interact, work with, live with everyone. It's literally the American dream. The question that we have to answer is, how is it that at some schools you can get this education, and at other schools you get some kind of substandard education? And is that fair? And is that what we should be doing? You see, and so the challenge that we really want to talk to you about today, my mother says it best. She says the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And what we wanted you to know is that the challenges we're facing, it's not because of our board of trustees. Matter of fact, I want to go on record as saying we have one of the best boards that I've ever worked with. One of the most honorable boards. A bunch of quality men and women. And I know that they're not the most popular people in the city, but for the record, they don't get paid for what they do. And I'm not just sending appreciation to the Waco ISD board. I'm really appreciative of all elected officials. Public service is a difficult job. It is not for the weak nor the timid. For the record, I'm not elected. But what we're about to talk about really is a result of what happens in Austin every 2 years. And we elect our representatives in the House and in the Senate from all over this great state. And every 2 years, Waco, they go down there and they take care of business. And boy, it's for everybody to discuss, debate the effectiveness. I know Representative Anderson is not the most popular guy in this city, but he's a good man, and he's doing the best he can, and it's not a popularity contest. Now, having said that, we want to be clear as WISD that this came from the legislature, the House, House Bill 1842. This was in 2015. It's one of the things I'm irritated about, is now all of a sudden we filling up community halls and everybody wants to talk about what we're going to do to stop our schools from closing. Well, where were you in 2015? Where were you in 2016? These schools been low performing for 5 years. Where were you in 2013? Now that we got 2 semesters till we close them, everybody wants to protest. No, it's too late for protesting. We got to fix the problem that we created. House Bill 1842 basically requires the Commissioner of Education to close any campus that has been rated improvement required for 5 or more consecutive years. This is a mandate. There's no wiggle room. If our schools, 5 of our schools are not successful this May, they either close or we get a board of managers. For the record, I'm against both of those options. So if the mandate says if the schools are not successful, you either have to close them or you have to get a new board. Neither of those I will never recommend. So you know where that leaves us? Those schools got to make it. 2 semesters. You know, House Bill 1842 is one of the most controversial bills that was passed back in 2015. I don't think they realize the impact of closing schools in certain neighborhoods and then busing those kids to other schools. It reminds me of what happened in the 50s or the 60s. So because schools are having problems, what we want to do is make it more difficult for those kids to get an education. If we have to bus kids from Carver to Tennyson, there'll be more kids struggling to get to school. There'll be parents in our community, God bless our parents, I'm not trying to criticize, but we are wanting to engage with our parents as partners. You can't just send your kids to school at 8 o'clock and be done with them until they come home at 5 and then be done with public education. When's the last time you read to your child? When's the last time you checked your child's homework? When's the last time you've been to a PTA meeting? These are the types of questions that we're asking. And for the record, if you close the schools, all of that becomes more difficult. So what do? This law was passed in 2015. It becomes effective this spring. And in the legislative session in 2017, Senate Bill 1882, earlier this year, the state legislatures passed this bill, which provides school districts with an alternative. Instead of waiting for the Commissioner of Education to close a campus or replace the elected school board, a district can partner with either a charter school or a local nonprofit organization to operate a campus. The district also has to make bold changes to the programs offered at the campus. Now, listen to this, Waco, because I can sit up here with you all night with our distinguished guests, and we can talk about the benefits of surrendering our schools to a charter. We could talk about the benefits of closing the schools. But because of my commitment to the neighborhoods that we serve, that's why I'm sitting looking at this option that is afforded under Senate Bill 1882. It's the only one that gives us some wiggle room, if you will. For the record, it still doesn't stop our problem as a city, because we can come up with a plan that TEA approves tomorrow, and we will. But you still only have 2 years for the kids to be successful. So we could be right back here. We could change all the schools, redesign them, have them exactly what the community wants, what the state wants. And if we're not successful in 24 months, with our academics, they still come back and close the schools. So this pressure is not going away. And our kids and our teachers and our administrators will be resilient. And they will respond to this challenge. And our focus is not really the only people working on the plan with the state is the administrative team. Everyone below the administrative team, the senior level leadership, is working on one thing, and that's the education of our kids tomorrow morning. And that'll never change. We wake up and we plan our lessons, and we're trying to improve our schools. I think I could do it with more aggression if I didn't have to keep talking to TEA every other day. But it is what it is. I knew what I was signing up for. And for the record, you need someone like me as your superintendent. See, somebody like, I welcome the pressure. You know, I'm like, oh, you want to bring the Texas Tribune in. Bring him. This is not some dog and pony show. I give you my word. We will fix these schools. We will improve these schools, and we will improve them with the people that we have. Now, there's a standard. And everybody that gets a paycheck from WISD is going to have to get to school and meet the standard. There's a way. And you can't have one campus, one of our elementary schools, West Avenue, under the direction of Mr. Alexander, one of the highest performing elementary schools in the region. Highest performing schools compared to Conley, La Vega, Midway, mighty Midway. God bless you, General Counsel for WISD, Peter Russick, that's here. Yeah. But this is a moral imperative. This is not driven by standardized testing. This is not driven about how I feel about accountability. I actually believe in accountability. Until I got to Waco and they start closing schools. Now all of a sudden I want to revisit what they're doing at the TEA level. But just like we had 9 schools in the district that I was at before that were unwilling or unable to make state standards, and I boldly proclaim in Spanish in that school district that we will do this. Si se puede. And I'm here to tell you right in the heart of East Waco, we got this. We got this. And we're going to take this very seriously. I commend our board. See, one of the reasons why I don't want to get rid of the board, respectfully, they hired me. So I know some of y'all don't like them, but nah, they have some kind of sense. When this problem got too hot, this potato, it got too hot. They're like, who can we hand this to? Who can we hand? And here I am. And they're like, here you go, hold that hot potato. So just as I close, I believe you know the campuses that we're dealing with. This is not something new for us. Our board has been working on this. Our board has been to Austin to meet with the commissioner. I've been to Austin. We've all received days and days of training because we're on this list. And it just strengthens our resolve that if the community or the state perceives the board or the superintendent or our administration as part of the problem, we're here to emphatically proclaim that we will be part of the solution. We're not surrendering these schools to anyone. We're taking responsibility and our commitment. We won't rest until we accomplish this objective, and we do need help. I believe every one of these schools is going to make it this year. I really do believe it. You know, I got this movie playing at night in my head. And, you know, I don't know who's going to play you, Dr. Henry, in the movie. I don't know. But Anthony Anderson plays the superintendent. Y'all know him? And he's going to come up and he's going to talk about what we're going to do. And then at the end of the movie, dun, 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 they all make it. But if you really look up under the hood and you start studying this problem, you'll understand that this problem didn't happen in 2 semesters. It didn't happen overnight. And it's somewhat presumptuous of us to assume that we'll be able to fix this problem in 2 semesters. We're going to try. We're going to give it everything we got. And I'm very, very confident that at the end of 24 months, you'll see a new and improved Waco ISD where all of our schools meet or exceed state and federal standards. Last thing I want to say before I introduce our guests to continue our conversation is we're looking at all kinds of transformations. For example, the state says the schools have to look totally different. So like one thing we're thinking about doing, you have Brooke Avenue, and J.H. Hines. So one of the things we're thinking about doing is creating an early childhood center at J.H. Hines that feeds a 3 through 5 campus at Brooke Avenue. So all the kids from Brooke Avenue and J.H. Hines that are at pre-K 3 through 2nd grade would go to Hines. And then they would all then go to 3rd, 4th, and 5th as an intermediate school. We're thinking about doing the same thing with South Waco Elementary and Alta Vista. Alta Vista's on the list, South Waco is not. At our middle schools, we basically have 2. One is Indian Springs Middle School, and one is George Washington Carver Middle School. Our thinking, we've heard lots of ideas from the community, and we want to continue that tonight, but our thinking is create single gender schools where all the female students would go to the Indian Springs Women in Leadership Academy. And all the boys, 6 through 8, in that same feeder, Indian Springs and Carver, would go to the G.W. Carver Men of Excellence School. So it would take a lot of planning for us to accomplish these tasks, but they are creative. They are innovative, they're research-based, and I believe that they'll get approved by the Texas Education Agency. We have other ideas, so we haven't made a final decision. I'll finish with our timeline. But like another example is to create a 6th grade center, where all the 6th graders from Indian Springs and Carver would go to Indian Springs, and it'd be a 6th grade campus. And then all the 7th and 8th graders from those schools would go to Carver. And we'd focus our curriculum accordingly and really try to continue to improve our instructional program. So I won't go over all the ideas because really some of those have come from you. I'm not sure if Jocelyn Pierce is here, but Miss Pierce she's been offering me lots of research-based ideas. I want to thank you publicly for your assistance, and we welcome feedback. We welcome help. Our timeline is we're trying to prepare for a board recommendation in the month of January. We're asking our board to consider and possibly take action on a redesign in the month of January. If approved, we will then forward that to the Texas Education Agency for approval in the month of February. If the schools make it in May, well, then we'll have another conversation with our board about what to do. If not, then we automatically implement our plan for the fall of 2018. What can you do? We've provided a one-pager that really shows we're soliciting help any way we can get it. We have adopt-a-school programs. We have adopt-a-partner schools. We have volunteer programs. All of this is coordinated out of our Office of Communications. We also take donations because as well as we're doing financially, we really do need more fiscal support to accomplish our goals. So with that, how we would like to do this session, I'm going to introduce a few people, then I'll end with introducing our moderator. First of all, I wanted you all to recognize my good friend. She is new to Waco, and she's definitely part of our solution. I work with her weekly. She is dynamic, she is passionate, and she's from New York. Please help me welcome the Executive Director of the United Way, Ms. Barbara Mosacchio. So as we start talking about a redesign, we're visiting with people like the United Way. We're also visiting with people like the YMCA. I think you'll see a brand new, unprecedented relationship between WISD and the YMCA, and I'm very, very excited to introduce my friend who's also new, the Executive Director of the YMCA, Mr. Rodney Martin. And then I'm going to ask our principals that are here tonight to please stand. I see Dr. Jenkins. I see Mr. McAdoo and Ms. Sapal, Mr. Love, Ms. Carmen Logan, and Ms. Sarah Pedrati. So all of the principals that are impacted are here. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank my good friend, Dr. Peaches Henry, my sorority sister. She has been very helpful at helping us organize our message. With that, to lead us through our conversation, I'm going to sit and have a conversation publicly with a gentleman who really needs no introduction. He is the CEO of the Texas Tribune. He's known as a fierce moderator, asked the tough questions. You should have seen him back in the back. He was like in my face, like, and I was like, back up. Yeah, you don't know how East Waco works, bro. No. Anyway, so no, with that, please help me welcome Mr. Evan Smith.
Excellent presentation. Good evening. Happy to be with you. Thank you very much for having me to Waco, and I'm glad to be with the superintendent. Very impressive presentation, didn't you think? Please give him a big hand. It's great to find somebody in a leadership position who knows what he thinks and knows what he believes and can articulate it and has ambition and has confidence and has optimism. But you said at the beginning that you wanted to start with reality. This was a conversation about reality, discussion with the community, and I want to ask you about the reality of the situation you're in and drill down a little bit. We're talking about 5 schools. We're talking about improvement required ratings over the last 4 years, and with the 5th year, that triggers the actions you talked about. There are, in fact, 2 more schools in this district that are now in the 4th year of improvement required. You could be looking at 2 additional schools next year that would be subject to the same situation that you described. There are 4 standards that have to be met. Of the 5 schools on the bubble this year, 3 of those have 2 standards met and 2 standards unmet. The remaining schools have 1 standard met and 3 standards unmet. Now, they got close in some cases, Superintendent, right? Right. But this is a lot to ask of these schools. Now, I know you just got here. You've been here barely 4 months in Waco, maybe not even. Problem preceded you. But you knew what you were getting into, as you said. So the question is, how realistic can you be in talking to this community? I love your optimism. We're going to get there, you say. But you're asking a lot of these schools and of this community, are you not?
Yes, sir.
Shouldn't you be setting realistic expectations? I mean, it would crush this community to have the outcome you're talking about. Can these schools, I know you want them to do it, can they really do it?
Well, I really believe you have to have an internal belief system that permeates down to the students. Yep. And so if I was to send any message less than I absolutely believe, then what do you expect the principals to do? Right, they're not going to. If you do that with the principals, then what do the teachers do? And then ultimately, if a kid looks up at a teacher and they think the teacher doesn't believe in them, right, they won't perform. So I absolutely believe our expectations are reasonable. Yeah. There's been major turnarounds at schools with similar demographics like these at schools across the state. It really is about having a caring, quality teacher in every classroom, every day a quality principal in every school. And there is no way you can convince me that these kids are not capable of meeting the expectations that we've set.
Do you have the elements in place? You talked about quality principals and quality teachers. Again, you just got here. Are the right people in the right jobs to achieve this result on the short time frame necessary?
Well, you know, that's a difficult question to answer because we're at Halloween. I can assure you that our daily plan includes monitoring every teacher we have and every principal we have. And yes, it's a difficult conversation because there's a standard that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And, you know, can everyone meet the standard that's currently in the place that they're in today? That's a question that we'll have to determine. What we can't do more of is saying that a person is a quality principal because they make me feel good, because they look good, because they're nice.
You want results.
I want results, and I want results now. I don't want, how long can you wait? We already been waiting 5 years.
Right, but this is the problem, Superintendent, that I want to put you in the crosshairs of, right? So you say on the one hand, we don't have time to wait. We know that you just have basically 2 semesters to prevent, you know, what you would consider to be Armageddon, one or another unpalatable option for this district. Can you make changes to the personnel in this district on a quick enough time frame to have an impact on the outcome?
Well, for the record, we've already made changes. And so, yes, we can make those changes. We will continue to evaluate the adults in the system. Also, I think it's a little dramatic of you to call it Armageddon. I mean, respectfully, what's going to happen if these schools don't make it? Then we're going to have to come up with a plan to address the schools because we're not closing them. So either way, when we wake up the next morning, we're going to be responsible for students in this zip code.
So you are prepared to say to this community right now with certainty, regardless of whether you change the improvement required standard or not, these schools will not close, period. You are saying that 100% certain?
Not on my watch.
Okay, so then the option available, so then the charter option available, which would hold off the closure of those schools, you've basically telegraphed your intent, have you not tonight? That's what you intend to do.
Right, I want to be clear, the board knows I have the utmost respect for them and their role in setting policy. So, just because I don't recommend it doesn't mean that there still can't be a motion in a second. But I like to think I know our team of 8 very well, and yes, we can answer your question. We're not interested in people coming from outside of our community and taking over schools that are our schools. They're ours. We created this problem, and we're going to fix it.
I want to ask you about the concept of accountability. Then you brought up demographics, and I want to talk to you about demographics as it relates to these schools. But let's talk about accountability. Is there anything wrong with the concept of accountability in your mind, Superintendent?
Absolutely not. I believe you have to have, we spend taxpayer dollars. And so I believe the taxpayers deserve to know that the school they send their kids to are quality. I believe they deserve to know that the teachers are doing what they're supposed to do. And I believe we should be held accountable for student achievement.
And that is both parents with kids in the schools and community members who may not have kids in the schools now, maybe never did, but the community is obviously impacted by the quality of the public education system.
Absolutely.
So across the board, everybody in this community deserves some measure of accountability.
Right.
Right. Does the state deserve to have the similar measure of accountability since state dollars come into this community? The only dollars that pay for the public education system in Waco are not Waco dollars. The state budget funds public education, so some state dollars will commingle. Does the state deserve some kind of accountability?
I'll say yes. Yes, sir. The problem with the situation, the problem with the situation in the state is that they have an accountability system that is so convoluted and complex that you've got 3rd graders being held accountable for their post-secondary readiness. What 3rd graders ready to go to Baylor? That's not God. They will get to that point.
Right.
We're being held accountable for an achievement gap. You understand that there's hundreds of school districts that they only have one target group. It may be all Latino. It may be all Anglo. There's some that are all African American. But there are some school districts in Texas that have 9% economically disadvantaged.
Right.
And they're being held to the same standard as a school district that is 100% poverty.
Right. So you think that the system of accountability at the state level, you're generally okay with the idea of accountability from the state, but you don't like the system in place currently?
Right. I believe the system does not measure what it's intended to measure.
Okay. You came from Laredo, and you alluded to the extraordinary success, it's legendary actually within public ed, that you came from Laredo, you came into the district at a time when there were 9 campuses, correct?
Right.
That were improvement required. By the time you left Laredo, you had fixed all 9. That not just you alone, but that you and your team and the community had worked together to remove that designation.
Yeah, we did it.
Right.
Yes.
The system of accountability at the state level that you are butting up against now was the system of accountability in Laredo.
Yes, sir.
So you were able to work with the system of accountability in Laredo. Nothing has really changed here, right? I presume you didn't like it in Laredo, but had no choice but to work within it.
Exactly.
Right. Did you want to see them change it then?
Absolutely.
Right. How did you do that? I think people don't understand how difficult it is to accomplish what you accomplished. The credit to you and the praise for you is legitimate. What did you do exactly in that district to achieve the results that you did?
First of all, I have no time or effort spent on criticizing the Texas Education Agency, our honorable members of the House or Senate that created these laws.
Right.
I spend time focused on targeted student interventions. And see, one of the reasons why I feel like my system is so effective is because I get to know the kids. Mm-hmm. And once I meet a little kid that tells me that they're going to be the first person in their family to graduate, well, that inspires me every day. Not because I'm the superintendent, not because I work and live in Waco, but because I was that kid just a few years ago. And if there wasn't somebody saying, oh, little Marcus wants to be the first in his family to graduate, well, then we need to work on these math problems.
Right.
We need to work. And so that's the same thing I want to permeate to our kids today is I draw energy from being around our kids.
So that's what you did in Laredo. You worked kid by kid, classroom by classroom, teacher by teacher.
There's a standard. If you can't meet the standard, then maybe you should go to another school district where the standard's lower.
Right.
But if you're going to be in the Waco Independent School District, we're going to expect you to tutor kids before and after school and on Saturday.
You're not lowering standards, you're raising expectations.
For everybody.
For everybody, right. So the demographics you alluded to earlier, I looked at the numbers in Waco, was interested to see very high percentage of your students are economically disadvantaged. I think in the five schools that are impacted by this, 4 of those have above 90%. The last is nearly 90% economic disadvantage.
Carver, right, 87.
That's right. The Anglo enrollment in these schools is sub 10% in every case. Right. 4 of them are majority Hispanic, right? And then the 5th is just under 50% Hispanic and just under 50% African American.
Right.
These are diverse student populations. Poverty is obviously a factor across the board in Texas, not just here, but every place in Texas where you have high percentages of economic disadvantage. It is harder to achieve high performance.
No question.
Right? No question about that. You can't change that. You can't change the composition of the student population.
Right.
So then what do you do to attack that particular aspect of the demographic challenge?
Well, I really believe that's one of the reasons why we push our kids so hard is that we have very little control what they go home to. And I've mentioned this before. I know kids in the Waco ISD right now, and their biggest problem that they have is they have to decide, are they going to go to Texas Tech or are they going to go to Texas A&M? Because their mama went to Tech and their daddy went to A&M. And they sit at home at dinner and they talk about things like PSAT. They talk about things like FAFSA. But then sitting right next to that student is a student who has no home support. They go home and they're the oldest in their family and they have to take care of their siblings. Yeah. And so with that kid, you've got to level the playing field. You really have to assume personal responsibility that this kid needs more. This kid needs more help, right, more support. You might have to sit. I can tell the kid who's going to Tech or A&M, you better make sure you go over that FAFSA with your mom and your dad. Mom and dad's already looking for the FAFSA form at home. I might have to fill out the FAFSA for that other kid. I might have to go get their tax return form so that they can get their
Right.
Pell Grant and get their relationship with MCC squared away. Most of our kids can graduate now from WISD with 60 college hours. And we're really pushing that. And if they don't get 60, at the end of 60 college hours, most of them are eligible for some type of post-secondary certificate, or they're ready to go finish their degree at the post-secondary institution of their choice.
Yeah. But as you point out, not every family is equal, not every kid is equal. And educators have for many years had to play the role of parent as well as educator for a lot of their kids. And that is one of the challenges, as you say, that you face. The so-called social emotional learning piece and the role of educators having to step in as surrogate parents is an additional complicating factor in trying to solve this problem.
You know, I say to my team all the time, I always tell them, we're not a social service agency, but to some kids we are. And for 98% of our kids, when they come in our school, you know the first thing they need to do when they walk in? They need to eat. Because some of them, they hadn't eaten since Saturday.
Right.
And so they walk in on Monday and we have to feed our kids. Right now as we speak, we're having a coat drive over at Central Marketplace. You know why? Because it's about to get cold and we'll have kids that won't have coats.
That don't have coats.
So these are the types of things that we have to think. But the main thing we have to do for these poor children in these schools is we have to push the expectations higher and higher and help them reach those expectations. Do you really think a kid from poverty can be successful at Baylor? Do you?
I do believe it, yes.
I emphatically believe that.
I believe
so
it.
we'll have to put systems in place that really allow for the equity and excellence that we're demanding.
Well, and so to that point, and then I want to get to three quick issues as it relates to public education policy before we open it up for questions. To that point, once upon a time, you remember this, I remember this, I know Representative Anderson remembers this, that the accountability ratings, once upon a time, really did bake economic disadvantage into the cake. There was a weighting of those ratings. They understood that certain districts had it harder and that you could not look at it and say, this is all equivalent. Is that the direction that the state should go? You've now been in two districts with a very high percentage. In fact, the Laredo district had a higher percentage of economic disadvantage. Coming to Waco, Waco was the affluent community of the two,
Right.
was it not? 97% of your kids in Laredo were economic disadvantage.
Really, they all were poor.
They all were poor.
Some of them didn't fill out
So
the
you've
form.
experienced this now in two different, you've experienced this now in two different communities. Do you believe the state should revisit the way that they judge schools to factor economic disadvantage in more heavily?
You know, I think I'd make when my time is done in Waco 5-10 years from now, I think I'd make a great commissioner because I would absolutely use your socioeconomic status as part of the equation.
Right.
Now, having said that, I believe socioeconomic kids can perform. So it wouldn't be too heavy of a weight, but it does. You have to stop and think about what principals and teachers have to do when they have to deal with more than just lesson plans. They have to deal with trauma. They have to deal with abuse. They have to deal with neglect. They have to deal with all of these home atmosphere issues and educate the kids.
Right.
And you need educators that are up for that challenge, which
Right.
ours are.
So the three big issues in the legislature are now and maybe forever: school finance, school choice, and the degree to which testing happens too often or not often enough. Most people think too often. On the school finance piece, we have a system that has been in court maybe for as long as I can remember. The most recent round of court action on school finance, funding for public education, said the system is awful but lawful. It's a bad system, but it's not quite bad enough to force the legislature to do something about it. And for various reasons, as Doc knows, the legislature did not really do much about school finance except set up an opportunity to study it further. Would a new school finance system benefit Waco and benefit Waco ISD? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, I definitely think that the legislature should consider more money in the annual budget or the biannual budget for public schools. I mean, in my opinion, there's this attack on public education where most of the money is being directed toward charter schools, private schools, and really you're almost forgetting about funding your main schools, the schools that you're supposed to be paying for with your taxes. I believe that there's clearly room for improvement. How the weights work, for example, limited English proficient. That is a weight. And so for every limited English proficient student that you have, you get weighted amounts of money.
And this district is about 1 of 5, a little bit less than 1 in 5, is that right? Limited English
20%
proficiency.
in our,
Yeah.
in our district, Massa Minima, more or less, yes.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, that formula hasn't changed since the 70s. That's
So
ridiculous.
you got to redo the formula.
You got to redo the formulas, and you
Right.
got to give, when you have kids that are poor, kids that are limited English proficient, kids that are at risk, they're pregnant, they've already been in, had some kind of interaction with the juvenile criminal system.
Right.
Those kids need higher levels of support, and it's more expensive to educate them.
You know, Superintendent, that there are advocates in the legislature for a full menu of parental choice options when it relates to educating kids. Everything from what is currently the law, which is your kid's in a school that you don't think is working, you pull your kid out of that school, put him in a different school. That's at one end. At the other end is a full-blown voucher system. And the advocates for vouchers often say that in a community like this one, in a district like this one, if kids who have a lot of challenges are not getting a good education, why wouldn't you give parents the opportunity to take a check from the state and walk their kid across the street to a private school or to a parochial school? What do you say about that?
Mr. Smith, with all due respect, you can pretend like every child is walking around with this backpack full of cash in their backpack, and they can just go to Vanguard if they want to, or they can go to Live Oak Classical. At the end of the day, I guarantee you, on the first day of school, there are going to be 1,800 kids show up at Waco High School because their daddy went to Waco High School, because their mama went to Waco. There's going to be kids show up at J.H. Hines. They don't know nothing about no vouchers. They don't know what you're talking about, taking your kids somewhere else. If you try to take your voucher money to Richter Catholic School, that voucher's not enough.
Right.
So come on back over here to the public school where you belong. And lastly, and this is really the most important piece to this, in these communities, these zip codes we're talking about here tonight, these schools, along with their churches, are those are the lifebloods of the community. So you start closing churches or you start closing schools, well, then you're going to have problems in these zip codes, because right now, that's how the whole community operates around what happens in the schools and what happens in the local churches.
This is it. Very quickly, one last question. Last couple of sessions of our legislature, there's been a big debate over whether we test kids too much, whether we ask teachers and students to spend too much time on testing and not enough time on learning. Where do you come down on that?
I think we spend too much time on standardized testing. I'm really about insatiable curiosity. Yeah. I really want kids to be able to think critically, and I think that you can measure that differently than having them write A, B, C, or D. If you look at our calendar, because of some of the mandates we're under, we're testing 50, 60 days out of the year. Imagine what would happen if we weren't taking periodic assessments on 50, 60 days, and kids could really teach kids and
you
help
had those
kids.
days back, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's went too far.
Okay. We're going to bring you all into the conversation for the balance of our time. My understanding is there are 2 microphones and they're going to be walked around the room. If you'd please put your hand up, we'll do our best to get as many questions into this conversation as possible. My only request in the interest of time and everybody in the room is please ask a question. If you can avoid making a speech, that would be great. And let's everybody be respectful to one another, please.
Good point.
Okay? Sir.
I'm Dr. Baltasar Acevedo y Arispe. I will make a statement. This is a Tejano community. This is a Tejano state. And my community is being battered by Texas Rangers, by Trump, by people that require that I prove that I'm not an immigrant when I drive. And you're asking me not to make a statement. The fact is this school district will be 70% Mexican American in 5 years. What are you doing for that community? We're not preparing for the future. We're preparing to hold the dike until the little boy takes his finger out of it like it does in Amsterdam. The other question is, This place has got to be a safe harbor for our community, for Tejanos. I'm not speaking for African Americans. You all have a good voice yourselves. But the fact of the matter, that is the fact. The other thing, too, when you live in a city that glorifies the Texas Rangers on the street, that is frightening to us whose parents, whose grandparents were being chased all over South Texas by Texas Rangers. We don't call them los rinches pinches for nothing, and you know what that means if you're from South Texas. The issue here, the challenge to the school board, is to be more assertive, to hold our state legislators more accountable. When they're more concerned about where I go to the restroom.
Okay, let's let the superintendent respond to your very good questions. Very good questions. Superintendent.
I share your passion for the Latino culture. I'm coming from a district that is predominantly Latino. Como se pueden dar cuenta por mi español, me la estoy pasando muy bien aquí. Having said that, really our instructional program is about every kid we got. And Mr. Pettis, who is the Latino representative on our board, he can tell you, we've already had serious dialogue about how we're going to engage and support our Latino students differently. For the record, all of our Latino students, undocumented immigrants or otherwise, whether legislature likes it or not, are welcome in our schools. We don't sit and check their immigration status. We don't try to hold them out of school. If they got a light bill, they come to WISD, and that's just the way we work. And we do have a host of Latino leaders. I'm thinking about Councilwoman Alice Rodriguez, who has, I've sat with her several times in my first 90 days, and her passion is fierce. And she does feel like the Latino voice hasn't been heard. But that's why we're having these meetings. For the record, next week we're having it over at the Hispanic Chamber. They didn't ask us to come. We asked to go to them because we're trying to have serious conversations about how we can improve the educational product for every kid. This is not about any one race. It's not just about Latinos. It's not just about African Americans. It's about every kid we got.
Okay. Gentleman in the back. Yes, sir.
My name is Mr. Jones, and the main thing is that we all know what it is. Baylor want all its back, so that's closing the school. So y'all can have all this back. But see, like y'all closed A.J. Moe, didn't put up no more marker. Y'all closed R.L. Smith, y'all ain't put up no historical marker. Y'all closed down this paper. Right here in Waco, we had our own Waco Messenger, right here in Waco, we have our own black paper. And they say you don't have no records of why R.L. Smith was our first black banker that had bought that property. You say you don't have no record? Yes, you have a record because you keep a record on everything we print. You keep a record. You can go back in the days after the tornado, and you can find that he bought up all that property. And y'all just want to close down all the schools. Bless old Miller, y'all say, bless old Miller. He stayed right down 535. Why you can't put a monument while people can see it when they pass by? Huh? But you can put a monument of R.G. Griffin out there for playing football. It's all about sports. Our kids are not going to Midway to make them a powerhouse. We'll keep them at home and we'll keep them at home. So we'll let them go out to Midway and make them more powerhouse.
All right, let me ask Superintendent. I mean, among the points that this gentleman has just made is, are there some families, if the schools who were to close, who would decide, I'm not going to let my kid be bused to another community or to another school, we're just going to homeschool them? Might you actually lose kids from the system completely if this happened?
I'm sure. You know, for the record, I know superintendents out there that they're trying to convince their boards right now to just close the schools and give them the charter networks. And they feel like for them, that's the best option. That's not the option for me.
Is there not, but let me push you on that for 1 second. So there are communities and there are school districts around the state that have found the inclusion of charter schools to be a positive. What is the case? I mean, you're not for this. It sounds to me like you're not for this. What is the case against bringing high-performing charters or just charters generally into this community?
You know, I'm not against what's called in-district charter models where, you know, the governance structure is clearly 7 trustees that are responsible and a superintendent that coordinates the administration. My issue with the charter network is that if they were to come into J.H. Hines and take over J.H. Hines, It's going to be a bunch of people that don't live here. All right, and they're going to have ideas that they're going to say things like, and our Board of Trustees already said, we're going to have a counselor at every school, an academic counselor. In some cases, the numbers go up, we add another counselor. Charter schools will say, well, we're not going to have counselors. Kids get that at home. Well, you can't say that in some of our communities.
So they have too much independence to run their place different from how you would run your place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's some high-performing charter schools. I'm not that naive.
Including, in the Valley. I mean, I'm thinking about the I'm thinking about IDEA, which is one charter network. That's started in Weslaco.
Yeah, I'm
It's
very
all
familiar.
over, a Hispanic majority parts of the state. They've had pretty good success, not without controversy, of course.
Sure.
I mean, so there are communities not unlike this community where this has worked, or where it's had some success, let's say.
Sure, KIPP Academy in Houston, Uplift in Fort Worth. We're very versed in the charter network. It's just not a good fit for
this
zip
community,
code,
right, okay, got
for
it.
what we're doing here.
I got it.
Yeah.
There's a question over here. Ma'am.
Okay, I have some information. I also have a question. Since you brought up the charter schools, and I got these facts from the TEA website.
Okay.
From 5 years of TEA data, charter schools underperform as a whole compared to their independent school district counterparts. And the evidence comes from the TEA snapshot data. Since 2012, charter schools have had forever students in special education career, have fewer students in special education, career and technical education, and gifted and talented education programs. From 2012 to 2016, charter schools had a dropout rate of 3.5 times that of independent school districts. And the 5-year average was 5.7% for charters and 1.6% for independent school districts.
And this is again from TEA's own website.
TEA snapshot data.
Right.
So I want to know, what is your plan with forming this partnership with nonprofits in the independent school district? And what is your plan to prevent this from happening here? Because we're trying to improve instruction. We're trying to improve student learning. We're
Right.
trying to improve local
Dropout.
control and civic engagement.
Do you have any
So what is
concern,
your
do you have any
plan?
concern that the track record that this questioner is bringing up would materialize here, even in those 2 years, if that was a decision that you made? Are you concerned about that?
Absolutely, and we've already looked, to get specific about our plan, it's still being formulated. We've talked to several nonprofits. We've had a detailed conversation with Prosper Waco.
Yep.
And in the model we propose with them, we're asking for all of the wraparound services, that's what they call them. I should say that's what we call them because I'm on their board. And it is intended to make sure kids get help with their health. It's intended to make sure families get support with financial management, financial security, and then their whole third leg of their house, so to speak, is education. And so for me, that's something that's attractive because we can concentrate on the curriculum core content, and then we have a partner that comes in and helps us with some of these other wraparound services that kids need. For the record, one of the people we looked at partnering with, I shouldn't say this, but it's true, is the Rappaport Academy. And the reason why we can't get with the Rappaport Academy is because not all their schools made it. And TEA has been very clear. If you got an IR school and you're a charter school, you cannot expand your partnership. So that's out.
Right.
They're struggling just like we're struggling. And so we're looking at every option possible. There's no bad ideas. I mentioned Ms. Pierce. Ms. Pierce has sent me 6 different options. And God bless her and her ambition to work with me. She has that, all of you have that access to your
So
superintendent.
anybody in the community who has ideas like Ms. Pierce,
We
you'll
welcome
take
them.
them.
You're welcome.
You'll take them. Other questions? So, ma'am, right there. Sir.
How you doing? My name is Maurice Halliburton, and you said that in 2 months, if the school district don't improve in 2 months, you had a proposal. So what do the schools what do the schools need to do to improve, their standards?
Yes,
I mean, do they need less students in the classroom, or they need some assistant in the classroom? I mean,
What exactly, I mean, we kind of got at this a little bit, and I'm afraid I didn't ask often enough to get an answer for your question, I'm sorry. What exactly do you have to do?
yeah.
The main issue we have in the WISD is we need more educators to assume personal responsibility for student outcomes. They have to take it personally. See, for me, the fact that we have 5 schools that can or won't make it, I hate to use the word in front of my good friends from Austin and all these cameras, but that's embarrassing to me. That makes me embarrassed to sit in a church. It makes me embarrassed to go to HEB, and I think to myself, there is no way that these good people in Waco deserve 5 low-performing schools. You got Baylor on one side of the highway, you go right across the other side of the highway, and they're about to close the schools. That doesn't make any sense. And so to answer your question directly, I got to get the adults more engaged. I'm going to use some of our principals that are here. They're some of our hardest working people, no question. I'm not questioning their ability. But then when you transfer their commitment, their dedication, down to the teacher level, I wonder if they can say everybody's giving what they're giving. Everyone's giving the time and the effort and the parental engagement. And, most of our teachers, God bless our teachers. I'm not criticizing or blaming our teachers. But most of them don't live in the neighborhoods where they work. No, they don't.
In fact, we talked, Superintendent, we've talked beforehand that you actually have, for a community that is this diverse, by which I mean for a community that is overwhelmingly a majority people of color,
Right.
the teacher population in this district is largely Anglo, is it not?
Yes, sir.
To what degree do you consider that to be a factor?
Well, this, I'm definitely going to get you, ma'am, for a question. This is a tough question because, you kind of got to deal with as they say in my culture, you got to deal with the dominoes you've been dealt. And so, I believe that the teaching staff should mirror the demographics of the students. If you can, but if you can't, then
What's keeping you from, Superintendent, what's keeping you from doing that? I understand that you
could
can't flip
do
a
a
switch
little-
and do it overnight, but what's keeping you from
you
doing
do a
that?
little collective search. You go over to my good friend, Dr. Livingstone over at Baylor, my good friend, Dr. Saxon in the School of Education, and you ask, how many graduates you have coming out of Baylor? And they'll say 55 or whatever the number is. And then they'll say, how many of them are of color? 4. And they going to Houston and Dallas and Plano.
Why are they going to Houston? But let's get at this problem. Why are they going to Houston and Dallas and Plano and not to Waco?
Well, I would say that some of that is, obviously some of the larger cities pay. But for the record, I know our board would want me to clearly communicate that we've made a specific focus to get our salaries to where they're very competitive. We outpay my good friends at Midway. We outpay my good friends at La Vega. Is that true? Is that true? Yeah.
We'll just fact check you afterwards, that's fine.
They'll have a board meeting tomorrow to up it, but
Okay.
anyway.
All right, so we understand that that's a challenge. This woman right here has been very patient.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just wanted to tack on to what the
Reverend.
last
Yes, good to see
person
you.
stated. We talked about the principals being involved, the teachers being involved, but sometimes it seems like when the community attempts to come and be involved, we don't have the explicit directions of what we need to do when we get there. So when we get there to the schools, we don't want to just sit around and not do something meaningful with
great.
interaction of the students. So I think that you allow the principals to have latitude in terms of how we do participate in the school, but we want to do it in a meaningful manner. And so if
Right.
there could be some time taken to really take a look at what we can really do. I mean, if we have 2 semesters, then what are we going to do
This
as a
is
community?
an excellent point. Thoughts and prayers are not going to change the quality of the public schools. And so if you have members of the community who want to work, how do you put them to work specifically? What do you have them do specifically?
Well, we have a host of ways people can get involved, and really our principals are trying to be very flexible in taking advantage of what people want to do. Now, for the record, what we need is people who are going to commit. You can't come to a community meeting, get all fired up because Texas Tribune is here, say you're going to come tutor once a week, and then we don't see you past Hanukkah. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's got to be one of those things where if you commit to coming every Thursday at 3 o'clock, it's because you're going to work with little Evan until little Evan gets it. And it's going to be hard work, and we'll walk you right through it. But nah, we don't need you to come on campus singing Kumbaya. We already got that. All right, we don't need you to come on campus and, shoot hoops. And no, this is about instruction. We need mentors they're not mentoring kids to talk about what sport are they going to play when they grow up. We want to talk about what grade level are you reading on, and what will it take to get you to read on grade level.
Okay, great.
Question
Ma'am,
back here.
there's a question here, and then we'll go to the one right behind. Ma'am.
Yes, hello, Dr. Nelson.
Ms. Curtis.
My name is Ramona Curtis, and I am the Director for Community Engagement and Initiatives at Baylor University. And maybe you are just what the doctor ordered. You certainly sound like it, and I really do stand behind you and believe in you. You know I have some concerns about where we are as a district and some of the options that we have. And in your speech, I did hear some indictment on parents. I heard praise for the board, some indictment on parents, and some indictment on the community. But there's a reason for that. There's a lack of trust in communities of color with the school district, and that has been there for a long time. And as we've heard as well tonight, there's been a lack of trust of some suspicions of Baylor University even. And I know we are working very hard at Baylor to restore that trust, to get out in the community, to really be a part of that. And our parents take on a different, they don't look like the nuclear family and all of these kind of things. And so I know when I grew up, my parents expected the school really to teach me. They really did. But I know we're in a different time now. But my parents felt comfortable going. Of course, my mother was on the PTA, so she was always in the
And
school.
so you don't think that the community feels as
But
comfortable with the schools now?
Absolutely. I want to know what we're going to do differently with the board as well. So even though these schools are in neighborhoods that maybe most of or some of our board members don't live, I want them to also feel some sense of accountability for those schools as well, even if the schools in their neighborhoods are doing better. So what are we doing to not just invite parents to school or invite the community to school, but make them welcome as a welcoming partner for WISD? And I say that same for the university, and those are the things that
Right.
we're trying to do now as well.
Do you accept the premise that the community does not trust the schools or feels unwelcome within the district?
I don't think everyone feels that way. I think a lot of people are concerned. It's some historical context to what Ms. Curtis is saying. I want to be clear that if I indicted parents or community members as unwilling or unable to come to the table, you misunderstood what I said. I believe that our parents are sending us the best kids they have to our schools. They're not keeping the good ones at home or trying to hide them. So I love our parents. And my mother was a what's called an LVN for you people in the medical profession, and she worked 2 shifts every day since I was an elementary kid from the time I graduated from college just to put me through school. So I understand that parents are doing the best they can. I'm just saying that we can't do it by ourselves. And we really want to engage parents as partners. The other thing I want to say is that with all due respect to the historical context with our board and trust and all of those things, you have now a leader who is clearly trying to act quickly, really trying to be decisive in my actions. I'm trying to build confidence in our community that this is no joke. This is my most serious commitment. All of my love, all of my peace, all of my happiness go into improving the educational product for every community we have, not just some zip codes, But until we can all proclaim that our kids are all going to quality schools, well, then you have a superintendent who is going to consistently push higher expectations. But no, I'm not indicting anyone. I'm trying to encourage people to get part of this movement so that when we fix these schools, our kids will say, yeah, we did it. And we'll say, yeah, you did it, you did it. No, I understand. Baylor has the same challenge.
Yes, ma'am. Kyle, I know that you are trying to keep everybody in this conversation, and I want to go as long as you tell me we can go. We are over the original time, but how much longer do you want to go?
No, we can go. Keep going.
You tell me. Okay,
go.
very good. I hope we take more questions. Good. Okay, ma'am, in the back. In the back.
Bring that up again.
My name is, I'm sorry.
Sir?
My name is Wilson Bogus, test administrator at TSTC, local college here in Waco. And one of my things is, one of the problems we had from a couple of years ago, when you merge two of the poor discipline and low performing schools in the district, that kind of messes things up a lot more than what they really are. And I'm speaking of J.H. Hines and Doris Miller. Those two schools should have never been merged together. Should have been left alone. Because you got this school over here is low performing, and discipline is terrible. You got this school over here that's low performing, discipline is terrible. I think that was a mistake that was made.
But that's before the superintendent.
Yeah, but I'm just bringing it up,
Yes,
just to
okay.
make sure it's not done again. Because
No, I appreciate what you're saying.
I don't want to go long. And just like you said, the demographics, you might need to look at the demographics of some of your teachers that are doing well at other schools and the schools that are not doing good at all. Because that does have a good impact, a very large impact on that student's learning. Now, I will say this, and I don't know if y'all are grandmas or aunts or uncles, but we need more parents to be involved. Like you said, we can't just fool with them 8 hours at school and then go home. Then it's Nintendo games or whatever from here on out. Discipline is a very large issue that can't be done at school. It has to be done at home. So kind of disappointed because I'm a young parent. I don't want to call anybody in here old or anything, but it should be a lot more young parents that are here that can listen and let them know that, hey, we need your help more than anybody else.
You agree with that?
I agree, and I wish we had 10,000 parents like you. And I'm sure your kids come to school and they say yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. I'm sure they already had a little breakfast sandwich before they left the house. They got a hug from their daddy. They got a hug and a kiss from their mama, and God bless that family. But that's not all of our kids.
Not all of your families, that's right.
You know, the other thing I want to be clear about as we go to the next question is that we really have this perception issue. And it's Ms. Curtis said it very well, it's a trust issue. And that's why I'm trying to get everyone to buy into a new vision and feel inspired by it. Like, forget about what happened. Let's go forward and create the kind of schools. Now, discipline is a challenge. Yeah, in our schools, these kids is off the chain. I mean, it's a challenge. So, having said that, that's where we ask parents to be. We can have a kid have a fight at one of our schools, and not only, see, for me, if I did anything at school when I was a child, the worst thing you could do to me is to call my mother at work. Now, but see, we didn't have cell phones back then, so you had to call my mother on her landline and it had to ring in front of all the other nurses to hear. Now, they won't answer the phone. Now these are our roughest and toughest kids, so it changes the challenge for us, and that's one of the reasons why we try to emphasize parental involvement more.
Good. Ma'am.
Okay, Superintendent Nelson,
Yes, ma'am.
I am happy. I read a lot about you before you came. I'm happy to hear what I'm hearing from you. However, what she was saying about the parents not feeling comfortable with the board and everything, it is a trust issue. I am a parent. I grew up in this district. 31 years I've dealt with Waco ISD. I left Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and brought my children home from a $12.5 million short budget to Waco ISD so my children could learn, only to have one of my children left behind and slipped through the cracks with Waco ISD to the point that I have removed her and put her in Fort Worth ISD School District online. It is all because of the fact that my child and I went left unheard. And the parents do it all the time. It's not like I wasn't active. Mr. Haddon, Ms. Brooks, they saw me at that school all the time. Sometimes they didn't even have to call me. I just walk in and find my child sitting there, and he looked at me, he dropped his head, he already knew.
Can you say, ma'am, and I know Ms. Curtis alluded to this as well, what exactly, to open up a can of worms here, what exactly is your problem with the board?
The issue is this. There are too many policies and procedures that go on within the board and promises that are made. Like in 2008, when GL Wiley was still open and struggling, and I was PTA president and Kermit Ward was the administrator. They promised us that if we voted for this bill to pass, for more school money to be given out to these children, that Wiley was going to get what they needed so we could pull it out of the same hole that these other 5 schools are in. They promised us J.H. Hines, and they promised us University High School. But what they didn't tell us was they were going to merge Doris Miller with J.H. Hines.
And you put that on, and you put that on the board.
Oh, oh yeah, they were here. Pat Atkins know, okay? This gentleman right here, to a certain extent, he's right. Those schools should have never been merged together. Doris Miller was out of control. Mr. Haddon and Ms. Brooks and all the other staff that was there, they kept those children in line, and they had teachers that helped keep those children in line. And it was parents like us that actually worked 2 jobs, get up at 4:30 in the morning, go open up at a $3.5 million store, manage that, leave, go to each one of my children's school, of which I had 3. And then go to another full-time job where I was the data entry clerk. So yes, we do come out. And I was the PTA president. I walked the halls of GL Wiley, and we encourage these children. We have no problem with doing what we have to do to make sure our children are okay. What we have a problem with is when the board and the district let them down and slip through the cracks.
So what do you say, Superintendent? You're obviously an employee of the board, so maybe the board members want to close their ears now, but what do you want to say to the board as it relates to now these 2 questions which are related but separate?
Well, what I would say is that school closures is a very complex decision, and it involves finances, it involves efficiency, and it involves some, let's call it local neighborhood politics. And nobody wants their schools closed. And so I respect all of that happened from 2008, and I can see how there are certain communities that their trust level might be sensitive because of what they experienced at Wiley or Doris Miller or North Waco Elementary or some of these other schools that have found themselves in this situation. All I can tell you is that I've been standing up everywhere I can go, and I've been saying Southern colloquialisms like they'll have to take the charters out of these schools out of my dead cold hands. Well, that's all I can say. You know what I mean? Like, look, I'm not closing it. And I know I speak for this board today. That's not even what we're talking about.
You have confidence in this board to not do what you've now heard said by 2 different people?
For the record, I know board members, I don't want to speak for my board because they can speak for themselves and they're really a corporate body, but I know individuals on my board that say if we can't get this done, maybe we should self-induce our own exit if people perceive us as the problem. I personally don't see it as that. I see more pressure on my office than I do on elected officials. Elected officials, God bless y'all, I can't fix what's going on in the schools. It's going to take some foot soldiers that go into like Ed Love, people that get up and be at the bus stop at 7:15. You got to stand there and you got to fix these schools. You got to take it serious.
You have a gentleman in the purple right here in the back, sir.
Good afternoon, Dr. Nelson.
Yes, sir.
Cordier Armstead. I know a lot of stuff has been said, but the main thing I heard you say is you're planning to hold the principals and the teachers accountable, and you're planning to measure their performance. As an ex-military intelligence officer and currently working at L3 Communications for the past 18 years as an IT manager, I have noticed that performance metrics and visibility improves change. You'll see results when you measure performance and you make it available for everybody to see. My question is, will you use something like that to measure the principals and teachers' performance, and will you make it visible to the public so that we can see how well they're doing, and 2 months from, or 2 semesters from now slip up and we wonder what happened?
It's an excellent question. How transparent can you be for this community into your measurement of principals and teachers?
Well, first of all, I have an open door policy, and there have been people in this room that have tested that theory. So anyone that wants to talk to me about this plan, this concept, then I'm open to having that conversation. We've tried to create unprecedented transparency. Did you know that you can look at our checkbook online? You can see every check that the district cuts. That's transparency. We're trying to be accountable to the people who pay us our funds. So I say that because Mr. Armstead is absolutely right. I spend 50% of my day dealing with management issues, and the other 50, the fun part of my job usually starts about 5 o'clock, where I go out into the community. Me and the board have made it an effort to visit churches. We done been to One Word. We done been to Mount Olive. We've been to, what church you go to, Mr. Love? Carver Park. And so we're trying to get out into the community and be responsible for this community that we're being held accountable for. And we want to, we accept it. We accept it boldly, and we're not going to rest until everyone catches our vision of improving our schools. It's definitely one of leadership. You know, I talk a lot about teacher quality. I want to be very clear that I'm not about just blaming teachers. That's not true. That is not accurate. I just believe that teachers are where the rubber meets the road. And if you really want to improve a school, then you got to improve the quality of instruction. That's the way. In Belton ISD, there's a standard in the 4th grade. And if they don't meet the standard, then you know what? The teachers in the 4th grade, they go teach somewhere else. And that's just the way it is. So if that's the standard for those kids, then why would the standard be any different for these kids?
Yeah, you tell me. Sure.
Hi, my name is Dr.
President of
Peaches Henry.
NAACP.
And what I want to say is, I hear coming from the superintendent and from us as well, and that is that this is now a we situation. We have all got to be on board with what is about to happen. There is a great deal of bad history in the past. There is true lack of trust, and there have been reasons for that lack of trust. Moving forward, we have got to come together on behalf of our children. So there's a way in which you cannot forget the past. The past impacts the present and the future. We understand that. But at this moment, we have got to come together. So there has been a time when the community has not been welcome in the schools. We know that we are now going to expect that the community is now welcome back into the schools, that there is something that we can do to work with those schools, and that we are all committed to doing that. So apparently Hanukkah is coming up, so I hope I see all of us after Hanukkah, because it's going to take that. These teachers need support in those classrooms. They need those of us who are able, who have the time to be in there working with them. So they have a standard, but I believe that we as the community, we need to set a standard for ourselves. I no longer have a child in Waco ISD. However, I am committed to being in that school that needs me. And when I say that, we've got to devote the time. We have to say, I can give 2 hours every week. And every week, at that time, you have got to be there. That is what these children need us to do. And if we cannot support them in that way, then we will be here again. So I don't have a question, I have a challenge. Sign up, tell us your hours. Be there when you say you are going to be there. We didn't get here in 5 minutes. It's not going to take 5 minutes for us to get this done. And when we get back in there, we're going to have to stay there, because if we don't stay there, we will roll back and we will be here again.
Kyle, let's do 2 more, okay? 2 more. We're going to take 2 more questions. You have one over there, sir.
Dr. Nelson, good. How you doing, sir?
Yes, sir.
First of all, I appreciate you for having a contingent plan. That's something that we need in our community. We've met before at your office, and we discussed some things. You know who I am.
You're the judge.
That's right.
Yes, sir. Justice of the peace. All right.
So, some of the things that we didn't really address, and I just came to fruition this past year. We've had some cases that started last year in, say, March or April, and they mingle on into this year. I put them on a deferment. If they do what they're supposed to do, yeah, we're good to go. We're free. I don't want your money. I want your kid to go to school. That's my goal. So with that in mind, whenever these parents come back for what is called a review, I ask them how the child is doing. And if they're making a 70, I say, you need tutoring. Well, Judge, there's no tutoring going on right now. So that's something that I'm hoping that we address. Yes, that's what's being told, and whenever I do contact the schools, some schools don't have CIS right now. So that's something that the board, that's going to have to come around and make sure we change that. So that's one thing. And now I have a question. It's from the former president of the Waco Independent School District, my mother-in-law, Ms. Colquitt Gibson. She had a comment. She is asking that you implement the restorative justice program that is working so well at Waco High in these schools that are failing so much at the elementary level, because you're right, they need someone that looks like us that can get on their level. That way the teacher will not have to deal with that behavior inside the classroom.
What do you say about that?
Well, I think that your points, Your Honor, are very well taken. He and I have had a private conversation about how we're going to work together, and I definitely want to take that to another level. You know, restorative justice is one of our programs. It's highly regarded. Waco High has a model. The facilitator in charge of it is a man who's very active in this community. I think his last name is Watkins. Yeah, good. Yeah, Mr. Watkins, you want to stand, let everybody see who you are. He takes it seriously. For the record, when I walk around the campuses, we have these positions called behavior aides. Now, I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that all of our behavior aides are African-American men. Now, what message are we sending about behavior? And you have these brothers walking in, and they walking in to intimidate. And I just think to myself, is that really the message that we want to send as an African-American male population, that we're only there for discipline? That's not McAdoo's only function. That's not Mr. Love's only function. Mr. Watkins can tell you that sometimes these kids need counseling. These kids need somebody they can talk to. So, you know, to answer your question, Judge, I'm willing to come to the table of discussion and collaboration on whatever this community wants to do to improve student achievement, and particularly in this question, improve discipline. You know, truancy. You know, how many kids, you would eat us up right now, Mr. Smith, if you knew how many kids missed 10 or more days already at Halloween. Halloween, we hadn't even got to April. That's when they skip, is in April. Here we are, we have unprecedented numbers that are already, we're filing. And we're losing money on those kids.
Right, because the attendance does matter as far as the
it's
way
a
that you're
huge
paid
way.
for the work that you do.
And
That's
so
right.
these are the types of things that we're really
Right.
going to have to come together as a community and decide what we tolerate and what, you know, I drive down, I go to campuses every day, and I see kids that are 14 and 15 walking the streets. And I'm thinking, we're going to buy a van, and we're going to start, they're going to accuse us of abduction.
We're going to round them
I'm
up.
gonna be throwing kids in vans and taking them to the central office, you know?
All right, this gentleman right here in the middle will be our last question. Sir. Yes, sir.
Is this thing on?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Nelson, I'm Andrew Lopez, and
Yes,
I
sir.
really appreciate you taking this time to spend with us and show some direction. One thing I do want to say to everybody is that we have to understand that HB 1842 wasn't just thought up in 2015. It's been on there for a while, and they've been trying to push this to go to charter schools. So it's been something that our state has been pushing for some time. I have two questions in that regard. With the charter schools that we have here now, it appears, I'm not going to say this out, but maybe I should, but that some of them are really cherry picking the students that they have in there. So my question is this, is how is that affecting the schools that have failed if those students were still back in that same, would it make that much difference?
You know, Harmony Science Academy had an increase in enrollment this year of 200 students. We had a decline at Cesar Chavez of guess how many kids? 200 students. And so they don't take just any kid.
Right.
That's what we do. We take any kid that shows up with a light bill. We don't ask, are you in special ed? We don't ask, do you act up in class? Are your parents going to come to PTA or not? No, they do all of that at that school. And so I would say that it's a push, you know, and I don't want to get into the politics because you do that way better than I do, but I can tell you that what's going to happen is I'm going to do a little forecasting on the next legislative session. Our honorable representative, he'll be down there in Austin, and he'll do his thing. And next thing you know, TEA gonna make a presentation to the House and the Senate, and they're gonna say, look at how many schools we closed. Look at how many charters we created. And I would say, look at how many communities you're starting to ruin. Look at how many House Bill 1842, they're going after the only school in that town. And when you close that school in Axtell or one of these other little towns, that whole town will disappear.
Well, your position on this is absolutely clear.
Well, the last thing I would like to ask on that is that, what does the charter schools do that we can't do?
Okay, so what is it charter schools can't do that you can't do, and you say the answer is nothing?
You know, I really want to be clear. I'm not bad. Last thing I'll say is my intent is not to pit charter schools versus public schools, but I'm a product of public schools. I walked the stage, I walked the line at Converse Judson High School. I also went to a private university, and that's why I feel like I'm an expert, because I understand what it means to advocate for the public schools. The PE teacher at Providence Heights Elementary, you know what she wants to do? She wants to teach kids health and fitness. She don't want to get into all the policies and no, she just wants to make sure her kids have a gym where they can grow and thrive. And public schools should exist where we create that for them. A kid that wants to go to Baylor, they should be able to go to Baylor. And it's our job to create schools that facilitate that. We want the same things for our kids that my good friends at Midway want for their kids. La Vega, Conley.
Superintendent, it's been a real pleasure to get to have the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Please give the superintendent a big hand.
Before we get out of here, two announcements. First of all, join me in thanking Evan Smith for driving down from Austin, up from Austin to help us facilitate. Evan, thank you. Very much appreciated. Secondly, I want to echo what Dr. Henry said. This is going to take a community effort. We do want your support. If you did not get a card that's giving you an opportunity on how you can help us turn these schools around and get them where we need to be in the next 2 semesters, please take the time, get a card, fill it out, and turn it in. And again, thank you for your support and your continued interest in the Waco Public Schools. And with that, at 7:47, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.